When Demos began their investigation or their research, at first I thought, well, we know how to talk to people. We talk to people all the time. The fact that it hadn't done any good didn't register. And I think what the Demos research was able to help us understand was that we couldn't just assume either that people were just, if we gave them the right information, everything would be clear to them and then they would agree, or that if they didn't agree, they were bad people and we should just give up.
When I first came upon the Demos work, I was actually pretty skeptical about it. But as we've used it, and we've used it a lot in Colorado, it really has done what they claim it will do, which is put people, if you use it right, it puts people in the right frame of mind to have the kind of discussion you want to have with them. If you're looking for something that's going to make people think that government does everything well, this isn't it. But if you want to be able to have a conversation about what government is, why it's important, why we should care about it, and why we should insist on it working well, this seems to me to be absolutely the right way to go about things.
It's what we do, it's what we're about. It's just that this is a new tool for us, and a tool that we think is going to be more effective than what we've used in the past. It seems to resonate with people easily and quickly.
I think it gets union members and government employees to vocalize what they do in a way that doesn't come off as self-serving. It comes off as what I do is important. It gets people to believe in themselves. It gets people to understand that as a social worker, what they do affects the entire of democracy. And they can talk about what they do in a much different tone because of that confidence that they have. We're always going back to, is this a Demos way of saying something? That's sort of an adjective that we've come with. Are we doing this Demos?
And it's a very, very different dynamic of a discussion than it is when you're up there lecturing to somebody about the state budget as if it's some distant thing that they may have a passing interest in, but instead to engage people as citizens, as people who are ultimately responsible for making those decisions, for deciding, how important are the quality of schools in our town, how important is it that the roads work, what's a fair way to share these costs, what kind of tax system makes the most sense. And I find that when you have that discussion, it's a very, very different discussion, frankly, with people regardless of their sort of political leanings. It opens up a discussion not about some theoretical question of what maybe government should do, but a much more practical question about what kind of community people want to live in and what it would take to create that kind of community.
And we've used it a lot in North Carolina, particularly this year because of the tremendous state fiscal crisis. I think we just had a lot more wisdom than we did the last time the state was in this kind of a situation about how to talk about what the impacts of this were going to be and why people should be thinking of sort of a collective public solution as was going to be important to growing our economy. It was a great success, and I know that a lot of it was because the way we talked about the role of these systems and what it would be like, if we were to, allow them to erode or decay, it just helped the greatest number of people possible step up and say, well, we can't do this.
We're expecting potentially 100 people coming to this training before the legislative session. We're incorporating into a very deliberate campaign around raising revenue in this next legislative session, and we're seeing it show up in obviously the advocacy groups that we work with are using the language, but we're also seeing it show up in, for example, the governor's messaging. The last legislative session, there was no talk of taxes. This is not the economic time to raise taxes was sort of her mantra. And now she's talking about a balanced approach to maintaining the things that we value. So it's definitely getting out there. Yeah.
Both people who would self-identify as conservatives and people who would self-identify as progressives, oftentimes they get caught in the trap of leaping to reforms and debating reforms. And when you start the conversation about what kind of Colorado do we want, what are the public structures that we need to have the kind of state that we want, it's a way for folks to find common ground that before they get to the reforms. And so it helps folks find a common North Star, if you will, before they start debating solutions.